Hey guys, this unit is on the cells. This particular video is going to focus on the diversity of cells. And three main things we will look at is size, shape, and internal organization. And these three all are dependent on the function of the cell. Okay, so we will start with size. The size is limited by the surface area to volume ratio. So in simple terms, the surface area is the outside of the cell and the volume is the inside of the cell. And what this is saying is that the inside of the cell grows at a faster rate than the outside. Well, that's kind of hard to think about. If you think about filling up a balloon with water, what's going to happen if you fill up the balloon and fill it up and fill it up? Eventually it's going to explode, right? So a larger cell is not necessarily a good cell. And I'm going to show you a picture that demonstrates that. Okay, so here's a picture of a cell that's very small, and then a medium-sized one, and then a very large one. You can notice the nucleus. The nucleus, the purple circle here, is actually the same size in all three pictures. The thing that is changing is the volume of the cell. So the inside of the cell is becoming very large. Well, the problem comes in with getting material into and out of the cell. So for example, let's say we wanted to get oxygen into this smaller cell. Well, that would be very easy. It just travels right into it and it can get right to the nucleus. But then this one, it can probably get in there, but not as quickly as it did for the first one. And then for this large one, it may never get to the center. Okay, well then, if it's not getting the oxygen or nutrients that it needs, what is going to happen to this cell? It's going to die because it doesn't have the nutrients and things that it needs to be able to survive. Okay, so, and we don't want this to happen. So what cells do in order to compensate for that is that they split. They split into two cells. We talked about with bacteria, they do that by binary fission. And for our kind of cells, eukaryotic cells, they go through mitosis. Okay, so, and that's really important so that the cell can be more efficient. So a smaller cell is going to be a lot more efficient than a larger cell. And it's dependent on the surface area to volume ratio. The higher surface area to volume ratio, see here, this would be 6 divided by 1, which is 6, is more efficient than a smaller surface area to volume ratio. 24 divided by 8 is 3. So this has a ratio of 6, this has a ratio of 3. This cell, which is smaller, is more efficient than a cell that is larger. Okay, so again, cells divide. When cells start to divide, they form tissue. Okay, so cells divide, they start to split a whole bunch of times, and they end up forming tissues. Well, then your tissues form into organs. Organs form into organ systems. Organ systems make the organism. Organisms of the same species make a population. Several different populations make a community, and then finally when you add in abiotic factors like precipitation and rocks and soil and stuff like that, that then becomes your ecosystem. Okay? An example of an organ system would be your digestive system. Organs that make up your digestive system would be your stomach, your intestines, accessory organs like your liver and your pancreas. So all of those things work together to allow the system to work. But you can't live with just one system. We have several systems that help us work. And so that's what creates the organism. Okay? As far as population and community, a lot of people mix these two up. If we think about the Lion King, just as a simple example, the lions make up a population. Well, the hyenas also make up a population, and so do all the different types of birds, the elephants, the giraffes. But when you look at all of those separate populations together, we then call it a community. Okay? So hopefully that clears up those two. Okay, so cells become tissues, tissues become organs, organs form into organ systems, which make the organism. Organisms of the same species make the population, and then several populations make the community, and then adding in abiotic factors, you get the ecosystem. Okay, let's look at shape. the shape of the cell is really dependent on the function that the cell needs to perform. So for example, a nerve cell, you can see one right here. It's not the best drawing of a nerve cell, but it will work. This nerve cell has lots of branching that you can see here. Now, why would it be important for the nerve cell to have so much branching? Well, it's important because nerves carry information. They carry messages. They have to be sent very quickly. Okay, so in order for it to be quickly sent, the cell needs to be branched. If it were a round cell, it would take a long time to get the message from one cell to another to another. Another example, your skin cells. Okay, your skin's job is to form a barrier so that the inside of you is protected. Well, that means your skin cells need to be flat so they can form kind of a shield. So you're going to have several cells, kind of like a tile on the floor, but as your skin instead to form a barrier. So flat cells there. Your white blood cells. Your white blood cells, their job is to protect you from infection. So if a bacteria is floating around in your white blood cells have to be able to squeeze through vessels to be able to get to the white blood or to the infection. And so they will go to it and engulf the bacteria into their bodies. So white blood cells don't really have a specific shape. They're able to change shapes. Okay, but that's again important. It's related to its function. Okay, so the shape of the cell is dependent on its function. All right, and now for the last diversity item, looking at how they are different on the inside. Okay, there are two major types of cells. You have prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells. And we've already researched this a little bit. The prokaryotic cells do not have a nucleus, so no nucleus. They still have DNA, but they don't have a nucleus that stores it. They have a region in their bodies that is called a nucleoid region, but that is, again, not surrounded by a membrane. And so that's another characteristic of prokaryotic cells. They do not have membrane-bound organelles. But eukaryotic cells do. Okay, so eukaryotic cells have a nucleus. They also have membrane-bound organelles, which help the cell function. Organelles are kind of like little tiny organs. Remember, our stomach and our intestines work together to make our digestive system. Well, membrane-bound organelles all work together to allow the cell to function. Prokaryotic cells, because they do not have a nucleus and they do not have membrane-bound organelles, are very simple cells, and they're very small because they don't have to hold a whole lot. Whereas eukaryotic cells, because they have all those organelles, are bigger and a lot more complex. Okay, and I do want to remind you that even though the prokaryotic cells do not have a nucleus, they still have DNA. And their DNA looks slightly different from ours. They have circular DNA, whereas we have the double-stranded helix. Now, just to remind you, prokaryotic cells are your bacteria. You have eubacteria and archaebacteria. Again, prokaryotic cells do not have a nucleus, so it's pro-no, and then eu-true. So pro-no, that means they are prokaryotic, and they do not have a nucleus. And then you have eukaryotic cells, eu-true, they have a true nucleus, and they have membrane-bound organelles. Your examples of your eukaryotic cells are all of the other kingdoms: your protist, your fungus, your plants, and your animals. Okay, so what type of cell do we have? We have eukaryotic cells. We have nuclei inside of our cells. Okay, and so here's a picture that shows the difference. This is a prokaryotic cell. You can see it's very simple. Here's its circular DNA. Ours is found inside of the nucleus, and it is linear and a double helix. All these structures you see out here are your membrane-bound organelles. And so you can see that the cell is a lot more complex looking. Okay, so you have your eukaryotic cell and your prokaryotic cell. Now, if you notice, there are some little red looking dots in here. Same thing over here. That's one thing they have in common, is that they have ribosomes. Ribosomes make protein. So both eukaryotic cells and prokaryotic cells have proteins, have ribosomes that make the proteins. But even those look slightly different from one another depending on if it's a prokaryotic cell or a eukaryotic cell. Another thing they both have in common is the cytoplasm, all this material in between the organelles, and then, you know, all this clear space here, that is cytoplasm. So both have those. And of course, a cell membrane made up of phospholipids. But bacteria also have a cell wall, just like plants, but made up of different material. Okay, so this is a short introduction into how cells are diverse. We will spend a lot of time talking about all the different organelles and their jobs. Okay, so that will be in future videos. I hope this one helped. Thanks.